you, Pranaji. And we were listening to this wonderful talk by the revered Swami Ishtananda Maharaj. Wonderful selection of the topics for inauguration of this Vivekananda Hall. And my topic is worship of the living God, which is so very close to the heart of Swami Vivekananda, as most of us believe. One of his most beloved and recognized disciples, Sister Nivedita, she described about her Guru, Swami Vivekananda, in these words. He said that he was the great preacher of karma, not as divorced from, but as expressing jnana and bhakti. To him, the worship, the study, the farmyard, and the field are as true and fit scenes for meeting of God with man as the cell of the monk or the door of the temple. To him there is no difference between manliness and faith, between true righteousness and spirituality. Because when people talk about these different kinds of yogas or different paths, revered Swamiji was talking about the different faiths and religions and how all of them could, in fact, mean just one thing, how to reach God. That is all about it. Though they apparently are different, but they unite in that one area, that they are all paths to reach the same God. Here what Sister Nivedita is talking about, that Swami Vivekananda, how he harmonized these different paths, different avenues, the central theme of all the different faiths. Many of them that are actually walking the path of bhakti or the devotion. Some, though they are very small in number, but they are jnanis or walking the path of knowledge through the continuous discrimination between what is real and what is not, and then fixing their mind wholeheartedly on that path of that which is only reality or truth. They are the jnanis. And then there are yogis and there are karma yogis. These are the four paths that have been defined by the Vedanta. Sister Nivedita, she very clearly pointed out that when Swami Vivekananda talks about the path of karma, it is not divorced from jnana or bhakti. As people ignorantly, they think that these are different separate paths. When Swami Vivekananda talks about jnana and bhakti, and when he talks about the selfless service, then he actually is talking the same thing. We find it has been summed up very beautifully by Shankaracharya. In one place, he explained the summum bonum of all the scriptural teachings of Hinduism, that Brahma Satya Jagan Mitha Jiva Brahmaiva Napara. Brahman alone is truth, and this world is illusory. All creatures that we see here, they are nothing other than that Brahman. That means the Brahman has manifested itself in all these different forms. It is that one truth and reality that is all around us, and there is no difference. This is the highest truth of the Vedanta or the Upanishad that Shankaracharya gave to us. Sri Ramakrishna saw that these Brahman is nothing other than the dynamic force that has appeared in the form of the manifestation of this entire creation. He called it Mother Kali. He knew that there is no difference. It is that one truth which doesn't take any form, which doesn't act. When it appears as if it is working, acting, appearing in many different forms, then that is Mother Kali. He realized that it is that one pure truth that has appeared in all these different forms. He gave it the name Mother Kali. Kali is playing in all these ways and she has appeared in all these forms. There is no doubt in this ocean of scriptures in the Vedanta that can be quoted where this one truth has been mentioned again and again. That it is one reality. Call him God, call him Brahman, call him Allah or any other by name. But it is one truth that has appeared in many different forms. But unfortunately, for India at least, though the scriptures were known to them for a long period of time, during the dark period of history for the nation, we see that at least when it was 18th, 19th century, we could call it the darkest period of the history, when hundreds of millions of Hindus, they were openly professing Hinduism. They were considering themselves deeply religious. Many of them could chant from their memory long passages of the scripture without dropping a single letter or word. But in their day-to-day practice, we see completely a different picture. In their day-to-day practice, they betrayed their knowledge of their scriptures. At the same time, when they are talking, when they are chanting from the Upanishad, that it is God who, after creation, He has entered into it. Tat Srištva Tadevanu Pravishyate. Or it is God who has appeared in all these manifold forms. By desiring to be many, Ekoham Bahushyam. Or in many different places. But when they actually behaving and dealing, treating people, their own countrymen, then they are insensitized and senseless. Hundreds of millions of people, they live in utter poverty, in absolute ignorance. They were living hand to mouth and bordering, facing starvation death. In fact, the historians have dug out the story of those days, like Shankara Prasad Bosu and others. They have actually brought out the figures of how tens of thousands of people were actually dying out of starvation every year during those days when Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, they appeared in the history of India, that those who were privileged, those who belonged to the handful number of people who belonged to the higher caste, they did not care for these hundreds of millions of people, their next door neighbors. They were languishing in this poverty, in this suffering, and actually dying. And they didn't care. And they were uttering, they were quoting from the scriptures, and they were considering that themselves as very religious people. So, to amend this problem, to rectify this anomaly that was there in the society at that time, Of course, when Swami Chaitanya Maharaj was talking about the Swami Vivekananda's contribution to the world, and especially to the Western world, he was talking from a different aspect of Swamiji's contribution. And my topic is different. It is about worship of the living God. That is what Swamiji gave to us. So it was more focused on that part of the world which were actually needing that message more than the rest of the world. When Swamiji's message came about the worshipping God in all mankind, then it was not limited to only India. But how it all originated, started, I am talking that. Because when he came to the West, he realized what kind of service he could give to people here. And that was a different way of serving people. And there also, it was God whom he was serving. But I am talking about the beginning of the entire story. When, to rectify this anomaly, God has to appear in human form once again, as we believe, as it has been given by Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, that whenever there is some major problem in the human society, then God has to appear in human form, live with them, and give them the right direction once again. So God had to appear once again, this time in the form of a very simple child of the Divine Mother, whom we worship as Sri Ramakrishna. He lived on the earth and he wept for the poor. He shed tears for the poor. He started a new approach to religious practices among mankind. He compelled his wealthy followers to serve the poor. And he, for the first time, to this modern man, he gave this new mantra, that not compassion, but worship God in human being. He said in his own language, not daya, but seva, puja. He said, who are you to show compassion to people? Because deep in the scriptures, those who are following the path of Vedanta, they knew it very well, that it is God alone who has appeared in all forms or in all creatures, from the highest to the lowest form of creatures. God resides in their heart. So it was not something that people had to be told to know. It was something that had to be understood, felt, and practiced. That is what Sri Ramakrishna did. And when he taught this new mantra, he said that who are you to show compassion to a poor? Don't you know that the God is residing there also? So all that you can do as a devotee of God, that you go and worship that God there. Put food to the plate of a hungry, give education to an illiterate, serve a sick man, but you are not doing anything to a man and you are not doing any favor to anybody. You are worshipping that same God whom you worship in your temples and churches and mosques and gurdwaras, but it is worshipping there. This is the idea that Sri Ramakrishna gave, and it was, he gave the responsibility to the best of his students, his followers, his disciples, Swami Vivekananda, to translate into practice and to preach it properly, to make it known to the rest of the world. And we know how everything has changed since. But it was not easy and it was not simple. Swami Vivekananda, he was so deeply spiritual a person from inside, And one particular thing about spirituality is that more a person grows spiritual, develops spiritual insight, more he or she withdraws from the worldly activities. The world outside becomes less and less attractive or interesting, and the world within, the real truth inside, that grows more and more and becomes really interesting, charming, attractive. So for Swami Vivekananda, who was born with that kind of a very high spiritual capacity or caliber, for him to stay looking outside and do something to start a new tradition, to serve the poor, serve the illiterate, serve the ignorant, serve the sinner as worship to the God, it was not simple and easy. Many a time he tried to rebel. When Sri Ramakrishna asked him that what do you want? Because he was his best student, best disciple, he had given all sorts of spiritual blessings to all of his followers, and here is Narendranath, who he was known as Narendra, his finest of the breed. He said, what do you want? And he said, I just want to stay immersed in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. That's all that I want. I don't want anything else. Time to time I come back to survive. I may be needing some food and drink. Then only I might like to open my eyes. And then again I return back to my meditation and immerse into Samadhi. That is what I want. Sir, please help me or bless me that I can achieve that. Sri Ramakrishna said, no, that is not what I want you to do. Before you go to that level of your continuously staying immersed in that highest level of unity or union or communion with the Supreme, I want you to do some of Mother's work. And that Mother's work was this, that he had to translate this message of the new incarnation, the prophet of this age, that God can be worshipped not only in temple and in churches. God can be worshipped everywhere, and it is a duty and responsibility of all people to do that. Let this be the new mantra for the new age. This was what he wanted his disciple to actually broadcast all over the world. Swami Vivekananda was not very convinced, and he tried to run away from this kind of vision. We find that how many times he tried. Those of you who have followed his life story in detail, they will know, because sometimes he tried to be following the Raja Yogi Pohari Baba, sometimes he tried to go to the Himalayas as a wandering monk after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, and many other ways. Eventually, when he was traveling as a wandering monk, and he was in the western part of India, he saw the utter poverty of masses there. This is what we find from the words of Swami Brahmananda, one of the other very great disciples of Sri Ramakrishna and the first president of the newly found monastic order later on. Once after Swami Vivekananda had already traveled to America to appear in the Parliament of Religions and other places, then Swami Brahmananda, Swami Puryananda and Swami Akhandananda, they met as mendicant monks again together in Rajasthan in a place called Abu. And there Swami Brahmananda asked Akhandananda, do you know why Swami Vivekananda has gone to America? And Swami Ishtananda said, no, because everybody thought that we know he went to represent Hinduism in the Parliament of Religions. But Swami Ishtananda said, no, what was the cause or the main reason. Then Swami Brahmananda said that when Swami Vivekananda was traveling in this part of the country, the Rajasthan, Gujarat and other places, seeing the utter poverty of the masses and absolutely not being paid any attention to their suffering, how this ruthlessly the rich and the wealthy, they were living their life comfortably, Swami Vivekananda's heart melted. And he said that from this poor country I cannot gather enough support and help for these people to do. Let me go to the country of the Kuber, he said, the king of wealth, and see if I could do something for them. And that was the purpose. So perhaps Swami Vivekananda, he changed his mind and he finally decided that yes, he had a mission and he wanted to serve the poor. So he came to America, and many different ways we see that how it changed his work in India. But eventually, after he returned back to India and he started his new order of monastics, he made a rule that all members of this monastery must, alongside whatever path they select as their basic spiritual path, whether jnana or bhakti or pure meditation, they must participate in some form or other the worship of the poor as worship to the God. And that is what has been reflected also in the motto of the Ramakrishna mission. We find, which he said, Atmano mokshartham jagat hitaya cha, for one's own realization of one's own salvation, as well as for the good of the world. In one place he told one of his best disciples about his view or vision about how the novice monastics, a youth who will be joining the monastery to become a brahmachari, what they are supposed to be doing. And Swami Vivekananda's vision was, for a few years, let them forget about worship or meditation or anything. Let them only do this, start a soup kitchen on a grand scale and feed the poor. Let them go from door to door, beg from the people and collect enough to start a big soup kitchen. They have to do everything, they have to work, they have to cook, they have to feed the poor, they have to wash everything afterwards and again do it over every day. If they can do it for years and years and years, service of God in mankind, then they will be fit to go for real spiritual disciplines that are prescribed in the path of jnana and path of bhakti. So this is what Swami Vivekananda, new discipline he started, the discipline that we call as Karma Yoga, he called is practical Vedanta, and that is about translating the teachings of the Vedanta in the day-to-day practice. So we find that Nivedita was right. Nivedita said that Swami Vivekananda was a great preacher of karma. Nivedita was right. Swami Vivekananda showed that the jnanis and bhaktas, how they can practice their own spiritual disciplines most effectively. This was the path of worshipping the living God. That is what Swami Vivekananda is.